Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop Fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Mission Impossible 6 Fallout is over. A storm is coming.
Your mission. Should you choose to accept it? I wonder, did you ever choose not to? The end you always feared is coming. And the blood will be on your hands. The fallout of all your good intentions.
You had a terrible choice to make in Berlin. One life over millions. And now the world is at risk.
This is the CIA's mission. If he had held on to the plutonium, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
His team would be dead.
Yes, they would. That's the job.
Mission Impossible 6 Fallout, Andy. This is, I don't know if you knew this, it's the 6th of the Mission Impossible cinematic universe. And,
Well, I think you're the only one who actually includes the 6 in it, but it's good to know just so people remember there have been 5 previous.
Right. There are probably previous ones.
Are you disappointed that they didn't take a letter in Fallout and turn it into a 6, kind of do the whole thing let's replace a letter with 6? But then 6 seems like it would need to be a G or a B.
Yeah, I mean, they could have done a goofy A, depending on the typeface that they would have done.
It would have been perfect for Ghost Protocol, because then the 6 could have been the G.
That's right. Yeah.
They could have done Ghost G4 OST Protocol. Let's rewrite all the titles for the mission.
Are we talking we're going to rewrite all? I feel like that's the road we're going down right now. This is a very special episode where it's just typography. Awesome.
Yes.
People will love that.
Exactly.
Okay, so we are talking about Mission Impossible 6 Fallout. This is the continuation of our Solomon Lane villain story, and another continuation, strangely, of getting Chris McQuarrie, back on to direct a second time in a row. It's kind of an interesting thing. We've had different directors, different styles for the other movies until this pair, 5 and 6, where we have 2 of the same team. And also, it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. So, where do you stand on how this movie effectively levels up the movies that come before it? I guess that's an assumptive question.
Well, no, I think that this film is really doing a great job. I feel like this was the film where McQuarrie and Cruise and, probably Abrams, the other producers, Jake Myers, everyone who was kind of involved at that upper above the line level, probably sat down really trying to think about, okay, what has really worked in the past films? What hasn't worked, let's not do that. But what has worked, and let's take that and amp it up. And I feel like they obviously know the stunts. People really enjoy seeing Tom Cruise doing all of his crazy stunts. I think, people recognize that there is something interesting in his relationship with Julia. Let's bring her back into it. There's always drama with the IMF. Let's make sure there's plenty of that. Let's make sure all the team is working. Let's really kind of amp up the global threats. And, we see all of those things as they're really trying to take things. I mean, even specifically, and I don't know if they were specifically looking at stuff like, wow, the opening of Mission Impossible 2, where you're hanging on the sides of the rocks at Dead Horse Point State Park, is amazing. Let's have you hanging off rocks again here, but kind of amp that up as well and actually tie it into the story. I don't know if it went that far, but it certainly feels like it. And that's something I really like about what they did here. Because, I mean, I know some people complain about the fact that the last film kind of has this foot chase as the finale, and they in the scope of what we're getting in these Mission Impossible films, it felt a little less than something grander that we normally get in their big action sequences. And so they're like, well, hey, let's do another foot chase here, but we're going to even amp it up here. It's like everything was kind of brought up to another level and, I don't know, tied into the story that I think everything became, it just all worked really well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it does feel weirdly, it's presented more seriously. It's presented in, I think, even more grounded way. They've just been getting progressively more grounded to my eye. I watch this thing and it just feels less fantastical in some ways. We still have the opening, we get the your mission should you choose to accept it kind of bit, because now the IMF is still here. Hunley's here. And so there are still systems in place, like delivery of the tape recorder. And in this case, the opening sequence of the tape recorder is really lovely because it is, I think it's a real homage to the old, I think it was the Craig reel-to-reel tape recorder that they used as one of the models in the earlier film, or in the earlier TV show. But this one has a pop-up projector on it. And it is delivered in the Odyssey, the book, the Odyssey. It's hidden in a cutout in the book. I like all of that. I like that it's all enough throwback to feel like it's acknowledging its history, and it's sort of capturing retro vintage future tech in a way that is really personally satisfying to me.
Would you include the actual delivery of it in that as well, where it's a person coming to the door and it's secret code word exchange?
What about you? I mean, I like that better than many of the other ones. I certainly like it better than the delivery of the Oakleys by missile on the cliffside in 2. Like, I think it actually is, again, it's a nod to spycraft. It feels like the code word exchange, key exchange is the kind of spycraft that I kind of look for in these movies. It's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy type stuff.
There's something very fun about the old phone booth in Ghost Protocol that's glitchy and but it delivers the message and then kind of destroys itself. There's something fun about the random camera that he gets out of the convenience store in 3. But at the same time, we've kind of joked about this, like they have a whole team of people just kind of setting up these ruses and making sure that Ethan gets his message and then gets rid. I'm assuming that they'd have to get rid of the evidence or just make sure nobody else picks it up or whatever. And so it's a whole thing that they have to do. So to a certain extent, I interestingly think that, one is, let's see, it's the flight attendant on the airplane, I believe, who delivers Phelps the message to listen to on the plane, like their code about the magazine or whatever. Although it wasn't as scripted, like you say this, I say this, you say this, I say this. It was more just like, I think you really want to read this magazine or whatever it is. But to a certain extent, the second film is probably the only other one that at least seemed somewhat realistic in the scope of, well, we got to get you a message. Let's just do it this way.
We're going to literally hand deliver it to you.
Yeah,
right?
We're literally hand delivering it. And so in a certain extent, like 3 and 4, and I can't even remember what happened in Rogue Nation,
because it was the one in the listening booth that wasn't actually your mission. Should you choose to accept it, it was your mission. You've already failed. We're killing everybody, and that
Yeah, right. It was, but again, that's another one of those ones that's like they have to go to great lengths to have this whole thing installed in an actual business, and so the way that it happens here, I just think fits into much more realistic spycraft. And to a certain extent, I like this. I really prefer. I mean, I don't mind all that other stuff. It's really fun, but this one just feels like, okay, we're grounded now. We're doing something in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like it's all its own kind of special language of fantasy. Like I get that it's all its special language of fantasy. What I like about this whole series is that from 1 to 6, it has evolved kind of with me, right? And I remember loving the other movies when they came out and feeling some of them are a little bit more dated now than they ever have been. But this one, we've reached this sort of peak Mission Impossible for me, and it is my favorite right now. Like I find the look of the film, the colors of the film, the production, the camera work. My God, the camera work is, I think, just luscious in this movie, particularly in the incredibly beautifully grounded driving sequence, like chase sequence through Paris, which gives me such a grand throwback to one of my favorites, Ronin, but to so many other wonderful driving movies. One of the greats, Rendezvous, is actually, McHugh and Tom Cruise talk about Rendezvous as inspiration for this movie. And I remember watching Rendezvous years ago thinking, this is another movie that needs to continually be remade. And I feel like they attempted at doing something like that here. It just feels great, especially on the heels of the latest John Wick driving, which John Wick is fantastic, but there were sequences in that, in the circle around L'Arc de Triomphe that felt keyed to me, and I didn't get any of the keying in this movie. And watching the behind the scenes of Cruise driving the wrong way through a maze of, stunt drivers, but a lot of stunt drivers at speed was extraordinary. So there's just a lot, I think, to celebrate in how this movie works their realism into the stunts. You know what I mean?
Clearly, they're doing everything they can to find ways to shoot things as realistically as possible. And to a certain extent, I think the John Wick franchise is a good comparison because they're doing that too. Keanu Reeves is like Tom Cruise. If he can get in there, he will. I don't think is quite as crazy as Tom Cruise, but he still is trying to do what he can to be in there so you can really see that it's him doing these sorts of things. And I think it ends up playing really well. And when you have that paired with a filmmaker who is doing everything they can to find ways to craft the shots, I think it makes those sequences that much more intense because it feels realistic. And I think for me, I mean, absolutely, I think Driving Through Paris is great. But for me, the real standout in the film is the halo jump, which is when they're leaping 25,000 feet over Paris to come down, landing onto this building in Paris so they can sneak in and confront Lark, meet up with the White Widow, like all of this sort of stuff. They have this whole plan. But to get there, they have to go through this whole process of coming down in this particular way because otherwise they couldn't get into the building. And the fact that they ended up shooting this in a shot that was 2.5 minutes uncut is just this fantastic wonder. And it really starts from the moment like the back of the plane is open and you see Tom Cruise standing on the edge of the tail there, looking out over the land below. And then we cut to him as he walks back because he's just seen the lightning storm. That's the start of our 2.5 minutes. He walks back to Henry Cavill, says, "No, I don't think we should do this. I think it's too much lightning." Cavill like pulls his oxygen out, and then he goes and jumps, and then Cruise goes and jumps. And all of this is a single shot. They shot this 3 times. Granted, they were doing it over United Arab Emirates instead of Paris, and then they had to digitally replace everything below. But they were actually going through the process of this. They did it 3 times because they wanted it to be right at sunset. And so they could only do it once a day. And they go through the whole process of shooting that whole sequence. I mean, it's stunning to me that they rehearsed it as much as they did and they practiced it. And they made an incredibly compelling sequence that is completely real despite all of the other stuff added to it, as in like the storm and then the city below.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And I think I just want to add, like, it looks so good and the production design and costumes are so good. And they had to design and create these helmets that are at once props that just look great as part of the costume, but they are also functioning and completely stress tested Halo drop helmets to protect the actors, because that's how they were able to film it, to light them, diffuse lighting around their face, but they also had to deliver oxygen at just the right, pure oxygen for 25 minutes before they actually took off. And then it was actually helping them breathe and live to be able to do this. And it was a dope prop. Like, I think that is very, very cool that they go to such lengths to create this thing. And so I do. I mean, I believe it. I believe. And the stuff that they replaced, the digital stuff they replaced, the lightning storm, creating the lightning storm, they did not wait for a lightning storm to actually shoot this. Even as they were waiting for that, like, what was it, 120-second window for this fall, right? Like 180 seconds. I think it was 3 minutes. So they timed it to shoot right at sunset, and they had once a day, they had that 3-minute window to actually get the right light. That's extraordinary patience and craftsmanship, and a lot of pieces put into place. And it's Tom Cruise jumping this Halo jump. Good God.
And that's the thing. Like, when you are actually doing this and you're having the team training as much as they do to pull something like this off, and you're seeing them really do it, and you're going to do it as a oneer. And this is something that we've talked about a lot over the course of this franchise, where they have done a lot of these various stunt sequences. Like, Cruise talks about how he likes to make sure that they can actually do the whole thing in a single take so that they know it's all doable. But then they chop it up. And oftentimes, like, sometimes it works, but there have been a number of times where, like, gosh, they've cut this so much that it just ends up taking some of the reality out of it. So you don't even get a sense that this was something that really happened. And I think to the detriment of some of the sequences, it hasn't helped. But in the case of this, just choosing to shoot it this way and making sure that they can deliver the full thing, I think it's stunning.
This one, again, to celebrate sort of just the physical prowess of Tom Cruise, the there are a couple of pieces in this movie that were new to him. Hearing him talk about what he had to do to learn to do this stuff. And the halo jump was one of them, to make it look good and look real. And it was something that he hadn't done before, because how often have we seen Tom Cruise need to halo jump? So he had to learn to do that. The other one is learning to fly a helicopter. He's already an accomplished pilot, obviously, but he had never learned to fly a helicopter, and worked for 2 years with Airbus on their helicopters to give him the skills to be able to fly his own stunt sequence in this movie. That is crazy, Andy. Yeah. Crazy. And they said at the end, here's a guy who probably ended up with 1,500 to 2,000 hours of flight time, and has the ability and the practice of somebody who has 10,000 hours of flight time under their belt. Like, that is extraordinary work to be able to do this. And I believe every second of it. I love that helicopter sequence too. And so pretty much, it's hard. This is one of the movies that makes it really hard to pick a favorite sequence, because all of them are so extraordinary.
They really are, and that is another fantastic sequence, because they're doing such amazing things up and down as they fly, and in a way that it's kind of terrifying. Like, I've seen a lot of helicopter scenes with helicopters in films, and to a certain extent, it's like, yeah, they're fun, but then you watch kind of like a something like this, where you're like, oh wow, this they're doing something different here, just like the ups and downs. And I think a lot of it does boil down to, when we're cutting to Tom Cruise flying it, like, it really feels like you can see that he's handling the shift. I don't know what you call that main thing. The stick.
All of the sticks. He's on the stick and the throttle. But
he's handling it in a way where it's you can feel like he's actually really doing it. And when you see like just the movement within the helicopter itself, it really feels like it's not just him on a green screen. And it's not one of those movies where you see him doing it and then you cut to a really wide shot, like you would see, like, with Roger Moore in James Bond or something. And it's another actor, his stunt double, who's actually doing all the stuff. And then it cuts to a close up of him on a green screen doing helicopter work. And then it cuts to the wide shot of the stunt man. Like, we're not getting that. It all makes it feel incredibly realistic. And for me, I think, aside from piloting it, but the whole thing when he first gets on it and he's like climbing up the rope under the helicopter as he's trying to get on it, and then he slips and he falls and he barely grabs onto the payload underneath, and then has to climb up the whole thing all over again. Like, it's just, you can tell that's Tom Cruise.
He falls.
Yeah, you can tell.
45 feet.
And it's clear that it's Cruise doing that. And I think that's what makes it so exhilarating.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I just in terms of the helicopter and capturing the helicopter, the way they use such wide lenses, I think it's really unique because, as you mentioned, like those close-ups that you normally get in helicopter things, they're really close, so you can actually see the actor and avoid glare and all those things. But in this case, they invented these racks to sit much further outside of the dome of the cockpit of the helicopter than you would normally expect in a movie, so that you can see that Tom Cruise is alone in this bubble of this helicopter. Like, he's alone and doing it. And I think every time you cut back to one of those shots of him flying that helicopter, particularly in the corkscrew at the end, it is just an extraordinary, just the feeling of exhilaration knowing that he has done this thing. The hang is troublesome and to watch, because every time I watch it, it feels legit. It feels more real. And when you hear the behind the scenes where McHugh says, I think we had a PA on the radio saying, "Oh my God, I think we just lost Tom Cruise," because he had fallen behind the thing from the dangly bit. I don't know what it was. The big white, like laundry. I guess it was laundry day. It's just a big net full of like sheets and towels.
Well, I kept asking myself that. I'm like, the payload, what are they taking? What is their payload? Like, is it a big bag of money? Are they Uncle Scrooge McDuck and they just like made off with like a big bag of money that they're hanging under the plane? Like, I never quite could figure out what the payload was, but it just was something that needed to be hanging so that we could see him hanging from it.
Yeah. He does. I mean, he's secured. That was cleaned up digitally afterward. He has a rope, but to watch him do the practice and running toward the rope as the helicopter takes off and grabbing onto it, I mean, you can see that while he is protected in that if he were to really fall, he would hang from his waist. There is slack in that line. Like, it's not like he is being propelled at all by this thing. So here's a guy who's actually physically capable of climbing that rope in the air, in the cold. I mean, this one, it's supposed to be Kashmir. They were filming it in New Zealand. And it was extraordinary. Like, hearing him talk about just like how cold his fingers were and how cold, like, that's one of the things that makes this movie so excellent, is that it puts me in a place of realizing that's a thing I would just never do. Like, I think if I were in that place, I'd just like, crap, that helicopter got away. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a realization.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, it's just different guys, me and Tom.
Drink up, folks. End of the world's about to come.
End of the world's here. So we've got a couple, since we're already into stunt sequences, before we get back to the movie and the grounded stuff, can we talk about just run through the other signature scenes and get those out of the way? Because did you watch the stunt that was cut in the nightclub?
No.
There's a sequence in the nightclub that it legitimately surprised me that it was cut, because they landed on top of the nightclub and they got into the nightclub, and then they had to figure out how to get across this giant ballroom. And there were bisecting like high tension wires across the ballroom, and Tom Cruise gets out on one of these wires and hand over hand crawls across to the center and unscrews the tension mechanism from one of them to release one of the wires, crawls all the way back, releases another one, gets up into the thing, grabs a hold of of Walker and swings both of them back across this entire thing and cuts the wire at just the right time so they smash through a window and into the wherever they needed to be on the other side. Of course, we don't have any context of how, like, where they were in the scope of this of the nightclub, because the sequence was cut and we have no ability to see like where they were going and how they got there. But it is a crazy sequence that is at once like incredibly difficult, because it is closer to the ground. Like, it's there's no parachute, there's no nothing. There's so many obstacles to swing across this thing, and yet it's gone. And it felt like such an interesting major set piece in this movie that was eliminated. Like, it's actually hard to watch, because I just regret not being able to see these guys do it. It was lovely.
But at the same time, though, I don't feel like I was missing anything. Like, it doesn't surprise me that they had something, but we see them arrive. They get themselves into the kind of the upper catwalks of this location. And then the camera kind of comes down to it. And then the next time we see them, they're both in their tuxes and they're kind of walking through the crowd.
Right.
And that for me was fine. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. If there was something there, it would have been fine. But knowing that we still had the bathroom fight and then the whole escape with the White Widow, like, there were several other big moments that were going to be happening in this location. And I can see them saying, you know what, maybe we don't need all of those here.
Right. Of course. And it really is just, the surprise to me was I wonder how many other major action set pieces did they set up, like conceive, set up, produce, and do, and that we're missing. Like, I wonder the other movies, because it always seems to me in my head that if you're going to put the kind of resources toward building the rigging and the production setup to actually do one of these stunts, like, you're only going to do that if you're serious about putting it in the movie. And I think that's an assumption that is challenged when I watch this particular sequence, because it's not a trivial sequence and it was just cut.
Well, I suppose that's always the challenge of filmmaking, though, because when you're writing the script, everything seems necessary. When you're filming, everything seems necessary, but you're changing stuff that from the script. And it's the whole adage, you know, you're writing the movie 3 times, the script, and then when you're filming, and then when you're editing, and you come to the edit and you're like, gosh, you know, it's a fantastic sequence, we just don't need it. And I feel like that happens all the time. And we've talked about so many things in so many different contexts of deleted scenes, extended scenes over the years of doing this show. And some of them were added back in extended editions or director's cuts. Some of them weren't. But we've seen them in all levels of completion, from being incredibly rough to being fully done. It's just cut for time or whatever the case may be. And so I do think it's just one of those things where, it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that does lead us to one of I would say another significant set piece, even though it's not in the air at all, which is the bathroom fight. The fight where Ethan and Walker attempt to take on this John Lark character, supposedly at the time, John Lark, and we get a fantastic sequence in the bathroom where they just beat the crap out of each other, and it is extraordinary and memorable and gruesome all the same.
Well, and I suppose the thing that you get in a sequence like this is you get a sense of this spy who does insane, incredible things through all of these different films. But when it comes to just fist on fist, pugilism, he's not necessarily the best. Like, he does a lot better when it's spycraft, when it's running, when it's tracking, when it's catching, like that sort of stuff. But when it comes to, okay, we're just going to stand here and take blows, he's not always going to be the strongest person there and does have to try coming up with other solutions. And so I found that to be an interesting element to kind of, have as something that Ethan is dealing with, especially when paired with, Henry Cavill, built like Superman, and who is much more ready to kind of take this down. But even then, Lark is clearly somebody who's ready to take them both on.
Yeah, and I think that's that gives us the that dynamic in the bathroom is absolutely on par, because both of these guys built differently, they fight differently, and the way they choose to use their physicality in this room is amazing, and it gives us the signature Cavill cock, where he cocks his arms. You know what I'm talking about? The Cavill cock.
I think some people are probably wishing you were talking about something else.
For 6 weeks, I've been looking forward to doing this show so I could say those words. Yeah. So it is. It's a funny bit of internet that move of him cocking his arms actually lived on. Hearing him talk about it, it doesn't seem like it was terribly planned. It's just a thing that his arms did, which the best stuff is always like that, I guess. But I absolutely adore this fight. It's so brutal. It is one of the fights that makes me think, like, all three of these guys, like, there's only one guy left at the end of this, because in a couple of good hits, the other two are dead. Like, this is so brutal that I just don't feel like any of them would have lasted that long. But it makes for great movie. Oh, my goodness. Great movie.
It is an interesting sequence, though, because it does bring Ilsa back into the fold, but also it does make you wonder, because it is so brutal, so violent, like everything is just getting torn apart in this bathroom. It does make you wonder, if she didn't come in, where would things have ended? Because it certainly doesn't seem like they would have gone well. It's a brutal fight, and it works well. So, and again, brings Ilsa back into the fold in yet again another capacity where she's working in a mysterious way opposite Hunt and what he's trying to accomplish. And so I found that to be kind of fun with her, where she again has to kind of, as much as she doesn't want to, work against Hunt.
And she's wearing a suit. Right? Like, she is a professional, like, it's just a professional spy. Like, she's not showing up as a sex symbol. And part of that is because structurally, we already have a sex symbol in the next sequence. Like, we're going to go see the White Widow, and she's wearing sexy dress time this time. But I think it is also, to my eye, a sign that the relationship between Ethan and Ilsa is maturing, and that she doesn't have to be a sex symbol. She's appreciated in terms of their relationship in a different way. And she's used differently, and I think in a more sophisticated way in this movie. She is very much the badass that she was in the last movie, but she's even more so that they've sort of removed one sense in her. And is she still attractive to Ethan, and that sort of tension that exists in this movie as a kind of a throwback to the last movie is, I think, really satisfying to watch how he deals with that. So much of this movie is also dealing with the issues of having two loves of his life. And Luther as much as says so later in the movie. Like, he had Julia and now he's got you, and you need to walk away because Ethan is a robot man. And you can't break his programming. But she chooses not to walk away. Really curious.
Well, and that's, knowing that Ilsa is going to be continuing into the next two films, it does make you wonder how they're going to evolve her relationship with him over those films and to kind of see what happens there, because there is that sense that there is kind of like this resolution with the story with Julia, the real closure that we have at the end of this film, but it does kind of allow that door to open with Ilsa. And so, Dead Reckoning at the time of recording hasn't come out, but we've seen the trailers, and there does seem to be a close connection between Hunt and Ilsa that may be more than just work buddies. So we'll see exactly how it evolves. Yeah.
It will be interesting because her complications of allegiance to state are absolved at the end of this movie, right?
Yeah.
We get that, her card has been wiped clean with Ethan in a hospital bed.
Yeah, so it does make you wonder, is she now officially IMF? Like, has she become part of the team? Because every time we see her, it's with Ethan and Luther and Benji. And so it really seems like this is the team now. And so I'm curious to see what they do in Dead Reckoning if she has now kind of switched from MI6 to IMF.
Right. Onto the big driving sequence. The driving sequence is big because it's multifaceted, right? They start in a truck because this is the stealing of Lane. Lane is in the back of an armored car.
And I just have to say, one of my favorite shots in the film is actually when the armored truck goes into the river and it's sinking, and you have that fantastic shot where the camera is like locked down to the floor of the truck, but the truck is clearly sinking at an angle where we see like the water is coming in at the most odd angle as we're watching it, like it's vertical or something. And it's a crazy shot, but it just is so cool and disorienting. And I love that they came up with a really interesting way to kind of film that moment.
The gimbal work in this movie is on lock because that's not the last time they do that kind of thing. The helicopter when the helicopters are rolling down the mountain, they do some more of that. It is not as dramatic because of the water, like the level of the water approaching Solomon Lane with the locked off camera is extraordinary. It's incredible. It's like super disorienting. And since you brought up like that particular shot and that camera work, that's the other piece that I think is done really well in this sequence, which is the high speed follow cam. When we have the camera behind whoever it is, it's either Ethan running or Ethan on a motorcycle or somebody and like somewhere running through an incredible long place with lots of repetitive patterns. We get it repeatedly in this movie, and it looks so good. It is one of those things that is just stylistically unique to this movie over the other movies. It's just handled really well, and it brings a new sense of motion and propulsion to these action sequences that I think are unparalleled in the Mission Impossible universe, for sure.
I know Ambulance is really the film where insane, cool drone work really kind of hit its stride. But do you know, were they using any drones for anything like in this film? Are you aware?
I have to imagine we would have seen. I watched every minute of the behind the scenes stuff on this movie, and there was no mention of drone. And all of the camera stuff that I would otherwise have assumed would have been drones, they were showing cameras locked to motorcycles and cars. Like it feels to me like this was not a drone movie.
That will be interesting to see when we look at Dead Reckoning, I've yet to see any behind the scenes for it to know exactly how they've shot anything in that film, other than the major, motorcycle off the cliff sequence, which was completely detailed. But I am curious, which does have drone work actually. So I do know we will have at least that drone work in that film. But I am curious, like as we watch the film, if we're going to have some sequences where we're like, oh, I bet there was some drone work here.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder if they'd made this movie even today, that Halo jump, like would they have been able to ever replace a human camera operator with a drone camera operator at 25,000 feet? Is there a way to match the physics of what you can get out of a human camera operator?
Because
they were talking about, when Tom Cruise talks about it, he says, I had to jump out. One of the things that you have to do as the actor is hit your mark, and there's no mark on the floor. And so he practiced for hours trying to guess what 3 feet is from his face to the camera lens. Because when he comes out of that thing, the camera operator is already out backwards behind him, and Cruise has to essentially stop his fall 3 feet from that human camera operator. I don't think it'd be possible. I really don't.
Well, yeah. I mean, the trick with the descent of the drone, I think, would make it very hard to do something like that because, I'm sure it probably is doable, but there's also a weight difference, and a drone is still going to be much more susceptible to the wind and everything that's hitting it. And also, maybe in the process of actually falling, may be harder to maneuver in a way that a person in a camera might be a little more responsive. So.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought experiment.
But I could see it happening on, some of the scenes where it's a motorcycle chase through the city. And I could see that ambulance-style drone work of a drone kind of, chasing along behind it or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because then you could even get it like up and over cars and things like that we're not getting here.
Ambulance is extraordinary. Like it's just
Ambulance. It's stunning. It's a stunningly crafted film.
Right. I can't think of another movie that does anything the way those action sequences are shot because of the way they chose to use the drones, and it's incredibly well thought out. Whatever you think of the story, it's an extraordinary experience watching that movie. So,
100%.
Violent agreement. I don't remember where we were. We were talking about the driving sequence. So the gimbal scene, yes, amazing. That takes us to the truck chase. They jam the truck in the alley. They jump out of the front windshield, and now they're on motorcycles. They're on the BMW R90 Scramblers. And once again, hearing the stunt people talk about Tom Cruise, saying like, who's going to drive these sequences? And they all look around and say, well, Tom Cruise is like the best stunt driver we have right now. Like, he's really good and proficient on all of this equipment. He goes from the motorcycle. It's an extraordinary motorcycle chase, through in and around the roundabout, through the Paris, through Paris Opera. Like, they do all these crazy locations. It's a greatest hits location for Tour Paris. And then they manage to...
And then he crashes it.
He crashes it. Oh, God. That's the one that I haven't seen the behind the scenes of. How did they do the crash?
That's a great question.
Was that Tom?
I don't know. It's just, if it was, then I'm sure he was on wires or something. Like, I would imagine there was some sort of rigging involved that would allow him to like hit something and then flip off. But I didn't see any behind the scenes on that either.
Yeah. And then he drops in through the boat. They get out and they get in the car. And that is the old BMW M5, which is another extraordinary, at this point, kind of classic automobile. And Tom is driving that one. And this sequence absolves us of some of the handbrake turn physics violations that we had in the last movie, because this car does go in reverse downstairs. It's a wonderful sequence where Cruise is coming down this little like pedestrian alley, does a handbrake turn in an opening in order so the car goes backwards off a set of stairs and lands on its trunk, and then he's facing almost the right way to be able to go forward, which would have been a very hard thing to do had he not done that reverse turn. He would have, potentially risked wrecking the car into the wall across the street. And I thought that was so fun to watch. Like, it just, everything feels Ronin grounded to me, right? Like, we haven't been able to use Ronin as a marker for any of these movies yet, as a way that it makes me feel. This is right there. Like, this whole sequence, a long sequence of just great driving.
Yeah, it really plays well. And I think the nice thing about it is, in so many ways, like sequences like this feel so integrated into the plot. Like it's not just, okay, we just got to chase to get from here to there. It's like we got to chase, but there's a process of first we're dealing with pulling Lane out of the truck and crafting it in a way where we're getting away from the White Widow's brother and all of his goons who are going to kill everybody. So we got to come up with this whole plan. And then, of course, Luther and Benji are underwater, like pulling him out of this thing. Like there's a whole element that he's added to this. And then, of course, he's on the run with Walker. And then he's got to get to them in the boat and get to Lane. And now they're confronted by all of the White Widow's goons who kill this or shoot this cop. And then, of course, Ilsa's there. And now they take out all these guys. And now Ilsa's trying to kill them. And it just kind of keeps amping up and kind of moving us forward as we're kind of like layering the complexities of this fight from beat to beat to beat. And it works really well.
Yeah, it really does. And that takes us to the underground. And now we get back into a little bit of story where we have a use of the mask. I think this is just once we get in this movie.
No, we had the Wolf Blitzer.
Wolf Blitzer! Oh, God, Wolf. I totally forgot the Wolf Blitzer shout out.
Yeah, and we had the attempted bathroom use, but it gets smashed by their computer gets smashed and it's not working very well. And then, of course, it gets completely obliterated when Lark wakes up and uses it to beat them up.
Which we should say is one of the markers of this movie. Like Tom Cruise stuff breaks all the time, including like he often is like like powered in fights. The computers break. Like that's kind of a thing in this movie too. So
yeah, they're totally amping that up. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I do think like this use of the mask to kind of pull Walker out and get him to reveal who he really is, I think is great. But I have a question about this for you. Based on the trailer and then based on his character, Walker, up to this point in the film, did you see him already as a villain, or did you think he was just a good guy, but who was just in bad grace? Like he and Hunt just clearly did not get along. Like, were you already kind of like, he just seems like a bad guy? Where were you? Do you remember when you first saw this?
Well, I don't remember when I first saw it, but I do remember when he hands the phone over to his boss and the phone is not broken. That was a clear sign that he is a bad guy to me. The whole idea was he was giving them John Lark's phone from the bathroom, right? Yeah. When they got him, he said, here's all the data. But the phone that we had the close-up shot in the bathroom, and the phone had been smashed in the fight. The phone that he hands her later is, that's an unbroken phone.
But that's her Erica.
Erica, right.
And so you didn't think that was just him being like covert CIA because they don't trust the IMF?
No, I thought it was him trying to like get one up on Hunt. I thought he was a bad guy. I didn't know why, but I thought, oh, he's a bad guy. Also, mustache. I mean, mustache. Come on.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if it's an issue that this franchise has kind of built into itself where you just really don't trust anybody. Like, I mean, we've kind of been trained to not trust any of the good guys that we have. And so we're always suspect of everybody. They build it in with Jeremy Renner. We're like, he's suspect, although he ends up being a good guy. But we kind of, we'd already learned our lesson from trusting not Lawrence Fishburne's character, but the other one at IMF in 3. And it's like we keep having these people built into the story of like there's this rogue good guy, and so it almost becomes a non-surprise whether you thought he was bad or not. And I'm in the same place as you where I'm like, I don't think I thought he was bad, but there was something about the way that he was kind of depicted in the trailers or even just up to this point where I just kind of didn't feel like I trusted him. So I probably was not surprised at all when he reveals that he's actually working with Solomon Lane and is Lark and has this whole plan.
Yeah, there's a little bit, I guess, if we're going to be hypercritical about it, like there's a little bit of the sort of Doyleist thinking that comes into it. So if you just approach this as from the perspective of economy of characters, when you bring in this brooding mustachioed guy who works for another agency, he's the outsider on the team. Of course, he's going to be suspect. Does it hold up from the Watsonian perspective, which is like, does it hold up to the internal logic of the film? Does it ever take me out of the film that they're making assumptions that go too far? It doesn't for me, but I can see how somebody might lodge a complaint that it's a little too simple.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I don't think it's a huge issue. I think that he's an interesting enough character. He's set up as kind of the CIA tough guy that, I mean, even Hundley is just like, yeah, he's the one that they brought in because he is the one that, stops these problems before they turn into something, because he's violent, he's tough, and he's kind of merciless. And so there is already this sense of that. And so I think I could have seen it play either way, where he was a bad guy or he was a good guy who was just ready to kind of stop Hunt and his craziness. I think it could have played either way. The fact that he ended up being Lark really ended up, it was like, oh, okay, I guess I kind of buy into all of that. It wasn't too crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think that I think Cavill does great in the role. I think he fits, and I think there's something fun seeing him in something like this after playing such a good guy with Superman for as many films as he did that. I just think that he works well in this role. I find him completely believable as this violent, angry kind of terrorist,
Because also we've seen him as violent, angry Superman.
Well, that's true.
That's kind of a leading indicator for him.
He's not quite the Christopher Reeve version.
Right. He's no Christopher Reeve. No, I'm with you. I think he's great. And leading out of that sequence, like we have, I think the ruse, the tricking of Walker in this sequence actually plays well for me. And it's a nice, tight sequence that has a solid setup and a great resolution and involves a mask. And I love it. And I love it that Angela Bassett is already a step ahead of them here. That felt like a surprise that was kind of earned. And so, it works.
Well, and to a certain extent, he was too. And that, I think, was an interesting element. Not that he knew that they were going to pull this trick where they were going to get him to reveal who he was, but just the fact that he was always ready for something else to happen. The fact that he had people on his side who were already infiltrated into the CIA's hit team who were here that he could then pull into action so that they could actually take them down. Like, that also shows a lot of forward thinking with him, just to be on the ready. And I think as much as everybody is in this sequence, like trying to prove that they're ahead of everyone else, it's the fact that he ended up having just the right number of people there to kind of like make it actually happen so that he could escape. Like, that was actually a great surprise. And I think it worked well seeing how he ended up affecting his escape, his and Lane's escape.
Which takes us to the second to the last great chase, the last great foot chase of the movie, which I believe has Tom Cruise running possibly more than any of the other movies altogether in terms of just straight distance. And that is a measure we haven't calculated, the total distance run by Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible.
He may have run a lot in 4, but so much of it is in the sandstorm that we just don't really know.
We don't
exactly how far
measure it.
I think by the time we see the Burj Khalifa again, it's pretty far away. Yeah. So I think he made it pretty far.
You're right. It's probably far.
This one, I love that it goes through a funeral. I love that it goes up onto the roofs. One of my favorite moments in the film is when he's in the office and he's just screaming into his earbud that no one else there sees. And I just imagine all these people like hearing him, "I'm jumping out of a window," and just like the things that he's saying without knowing what's on the other side. I find that to be hilarious. And just watching these people and the woman who kind of like, he takes her chair. It's one of the funniest bits in the film.
A window. Oh my God. And that, speaking of technology not working right, the fact that Benji, who is right now the guy in the chair, with Luther sitting right across from him and watching Benji first having the rotation lock on the iPad set, so he's looking at it upside down, and then not looking at it in 3D mode, so he didn't know that Cruz was about to jump out of a window. He only said he needed to turn right. I thought was a really great little bit of comedy in here. The other thing now, again, because of the joy of watching behind the scenes, like knowing that that Tom Cruise is acting as if Ethan Hunt doesn't want to jump out that window, when really I imagine Tom Cruise is probably totally okay jumping out that window.
Oh, yeah. No, it all is very like that whole sequence is fun, and it builds exceptionally. Like he actually catches up to Lark or Walker, whatever we're calling him by this point in the film. But the fact that we end up having that confrontation between the two of them in an elevator, with Lark in the elevator, Hunt hanging from the bottom of the elevator as it ascends to the top of the tower, and that's where we get the threat toward Julia there, where he's just like, we're getting this real sense of kind of exactly how grand of a plan these villains have. And that's something I really have been liking with some of these films. I really liked it in 4. And, with Lane, I think that we've really been getting that, building the syndicate, and here the apostles that kind of like have followed in the footsteps of the syndicate, seeing what they're doing, but leading to this place where they have this plan. They have these 2 plutonium pods, whatever we were calling them, and are going to, kind of create these 2 nuclear bombs. And they are now to a point where they're also going to be threatening Julia. Like, I just found that moment to be exceptionally crafted, because it just suddenly it shifts the story in a way that we weren't expecting at all. When suddenly she's brought back in, you're like, oh, wow, okay, we're bringing her back in, and now she's part of the people who are being threatened.
Right. It's great that neither of them have any issue with the fact that Ethan is hanging from the bottom of this cage. Like, there is no question that Ethan will continue to hang on the bottom of this cage, even though in any other sequence they would have made that fact the dramatic point. And here he's just hanging, and the dramatic point is the threat. Which I think is delightful. And we didn't say, only because we spent so much time in our members pre-show, thenextreel.com/membership, if you want to jump in and hear pre-shows. We spent a lot of time talking about injuries that actors have sustained while making movies that ended up in the final cut. We didn't even talk about the fact that this roof chase is where Tom Cruise does a leap across between 2 buildings and breaks his ankle against the side of the one of the receiving building, I guess, target. Anyway, he breaks his ankle, and that ended up in the movie. So that's what the member pre-show was all about, is other actors who've done similar crazy stuff. You should join.
Fun times. Fun talks like that.
Fun times. And then they figure out, okay, we got to go to Kashmir, and they go to Kashmir, which is New Zealand, shot in New Zealand. They're in Kashmir, and they're flying the helicopters, and they find the bombs.
New Zealand and Norway for the final.
And Norway, that's right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I think another, when you're looking at action fight sequences, and in the special category of action fight sequences that don't involve Tom Cruise, I also really love the fight sequence in the hut at the end with Lane, Benji, and Ilsa. I thought that was an incredibly intense sequence, and she's also an extraordinarily charismatic action performer. And watching those 3 fight and struggle together was, I thought, exhilarating, as Tom Cruise is running around yelling for Benji outside.
No, Tom Cruise is in the helicopter when that's happening.
Right. Tom Cruise is in the helicopter. Yeah.
Benji was running around calling for her because she was in there, and then he comes in and gets attacked by Lane and everything. Yeah. It's a fantastic, everything in Kashmir is great. You've got Luther defusing a bomb, and then Julia comes in to help him, and just all of the tension of having to, pull the trigger out of pull the pin out of the transmitter, and then cutting the wires at the same time. Like, all of that builds in a really thrilling way, leading to Tom Cruise hanging off a cliff, having just pulled the pin out of the thing. Like, it was all exhilarating, and it works really well. What did you think, though, about bringing Julia back into the story? Like, do you like the way that she's integrated into this story? She's got a new husband, she's got a new life, but she's doing this sort of work now, and is in a place that is kind of like this critical point of this glacier that could potentially like kill millions of people because of the water that it provides to so many different countries. Like, did you like her being part of this pivotal relationship, and she's, you know, there only because of Lark as this guardian angel who kind of like put her into this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I did, because wait, who was the guardian angel though in this? Because he's the Julia and her husband were talking about how this benefactor came and put them here.
Right, it was Lark. He you know, Walker says, you know, he's her guardian angel. He mentions that when he's in the elevator, and he says it in context like, "Hey, I'm her guardian angel because if you show up, I'll kill her. So she's the only reason I'm the only reason she'll be alive." Or dead. And so he's kind of saying it in that capacity. But then later, they say that they're there because this guardian angel came in and funded them fully to come and do all of this work. So Lark was very intentionally putting her into this place where he knew he was going to detonate these bombs as a way to kind of like further destroy Ethan. I should say by that point, that was really part of Lane's plot, because we know Lane was really the one who was out to get Hunt more than Lark necessarily was.
And I'll be honest, like that's how I read it, that it was Lane's initiative that got Julia to that place, right? That it was because Lane had the personal vendetta, and the exchange that Walker has, or Lark has, with fake Lane sort of outs him, that like, why do you have such this personal thing going on? Why is this so personal to you? We have other stuff to do. That it was Lane who drove to have to put Julia in this place where she could be threatened and take her life in addition to like summarily continue to ruin Ethan Hunt. And so to me, that was absolutely effective for me to get her in there. Had she just been there accidentally, that would have been terrible. But because they at least spent a breath giving us some of that motivation between these characters to put her in that place, that made logical sense to me.
It plays well, and her role as a nurse and then doing this sort of humanitarian work, I think works really well. And then having them go through this process of kind of spelling out this plan where Lark and Lane are the, you know, impetus to get her and her husband here just in time for all of this stuff to play out. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Did she settle after being married to Tom Cruise with her second husband?
Well, I mean, Wes Bentley is...
I love Wes Bentley. Let me just say, I love Wes Bentley. Yeah.
He's always great. I feel like he's one of those actors who ends up kind of getting the shaft in a lot of performances that he ends up doing. I don't feel like he's been used quite as well as I'd like, but I think that he's fine. But yeah, when going from... But to a certain extent, I mean, yeah, a step down perhaps from Ethan Hunt, but at the same time, it's like you can see why she's probably looking for something that's a little more stable and sane. Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Well, that's the spoiler alert, you guys. They defused the bomb. We didn't talk about the last fight on the end sequence, but it does give me the opportunity to ask you the question. I love the fight on the rock outcropping. That location is real, and they spared no expense to bring 150 people up to that location to film this fight and hanging these two guys off the side of that rock face to kick each other. I did note that was Henry Cavill on that fight, hanging off the side of that stuff, and all the behind the scenes, they strapped Henry Cavill to that thing. I did also note that in no point in the behind the scenes was there any indication that it was Henry Cavill doing a halo jump with Tom Cruise. Did you find that interesting?
Are you saying that they said it wasn't him?
No, I'm saying there was no indication that it was. From all the behind the scenes stuff, Cavill is on the plane, he's in the suit doing all the stuff, but he doesn't do the jump for any number of reasons.
I guess I didn't see anything saying that he didn't, but I also don't see his name mentioned anywhere that he did.
Yeah, which I think is an indicator. Had he done that, they would have been talking a lot about it.
Yeah.
And I get curious about the,
Yeah.
What are the behind the scenes that indicate, again, had it been me, it would have been, I'm not doing that jump. You have fun. Enjoy doing that jump for those who want to do the jump. But
well, I think there are actors who are perfectly willing to let their stunt performers do stuff for them.
Do the work.
And then there's Tom Cruise. And I think, there's a definite line between them. And I suppose in the scope of something that's following very specifically Tom Cruise for the bulk of it, I mean, he does catch up with Walker and connect him and all that sort of stuff. So, but Walker largely, as he's doing this, is unconscious. And so to a certain extent, I suppose it might have made more sense to just have him not bother, because again, as the actor, he's not actually doing anything other than just falling unconscious. Yeah.
I also wonder how much it would have cost in an already extraordinary, what was the order of magnitude more expensive? Like, how much more would it have cost to insure both Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill falling out of a plane from 25,000 feet? That's interesting to me.
I was looking at longest shots in the franchise. I thought this was interesting because we had this 2.5 minute shot, 2 minutes and 33.4 seconds to be exact, in this film. Weirdly, I looked at Cinemetrics, which we always love jumping into. Nobody has broken down Mission Impossible 3 or 5, and I'm not exactly sure why, other than I think somebody did the bridge sequence in Mission Impossible 3, but not the entire film. Mission Impossible 1, the longest shot, and I didn't check where these are, so I can't say what the shot is, but in Mission Impossible 1, the longest shot is 48.8 seconds long. It's an hour and 12 minutes into the movie. Mission Impossible 2 has the shortest shots in the film, or in the franchise. Shortest longest shots? Is that what I would say? The longest shot in Mission Impossible 2 is 26.1 seconds, about 41 minutes into the movie. Ghost Protocol, there's a 45.6 second shot, almost 42 minutes into the movie. And then other than the 2.5 minute shot, the second longest is another 48.3 second shot, 15 minutes into the movie. So yeah, it's interesting how 1, 4, and this all have a shot that's about 48 seconds long. And then the second one, it's like they couldn't even break 30 seconds.
I can tell you the Mission Impossible 1 sequences, that's right around the rappelling into the knock to get the knock list.
An hour, 12 minutes.
Yeah. I'm not looking at the specific shot, but that's the action that's going on right there.
Gotcha. I do think it's interesting just in the way that directors choose to make their films, and how this is one where, they chose to do that oneer, which was great for the franchise.
I think it is. And Andy, it goes back to something we've talked about in every one of these other movies, is how well the movies capture the overall experience of performing these action sequences, right? And sometimes you just can't stop the camera to actually do it justice. And I think that just as the 2 minute and 33 second extended shot in Fallout in the parachute sequence does great justice to the performance of falling out of this plane that far and that fast, you could say that it's a little bit jumpy by the time we get to the corkscrew at the end, that we know behind the scenes he did that piloting and he made that shot, but it jumps around kind of a lot. It's edited pretty frenetically. And you wonder, could they have made some more patient choices in editing to demonstrate further the athleticism of its pilot and what they were actually doing? Because that corkscrew rotation is not a thing that I think people naturally have in their heads. It's hard to fill in the blanks of what's actually going on because how many of us have actually experienced it. And so I think that might be a thing of note. This movie does a lot of that stuff really well, and sometimes, maybe they could slow it down a little bit.
Well, but yeah, to a certain extent, though, I feel like there is this level of making sure that you're still telling the story. The story isn't the stunt. And so you need to, in the edit bay, go, okay, it's great to see this stunt play out the way it is, but is it, does it help the pacing of the film? Is it giving us the energy we need here? Is it kind of keeping the story going? Are we not spending enough time jumping back to Walker? And we need to, because we need to know what's going on with him. And so I just imagine that there are many levels of complexity, and it's probably hard. And we've talked about how some of the stunt sequences over the course of the franchise have suffered because they have cut so much into it. And it's just, but it is one of those things where it does, I just imagine it's the nature of film. It's just a very complex beast trying to figure out how to do everything justice, you know?
Well, and in that light, I mean, I stand by this movie as the best of the 6 so far in that specific regard.
Yeah.
For my experience with it.
You know, just in the scope of stunts and injuries and everything, one thing we didn't mention in the result of Tom's doing his own stunt, jumping across and breaking his ankle, it cost around $80 million. So this is why they don't like actors doing their own stunts. It's not that the actor's going to be hurt and, all that. It's that when it's the star of your show, you have to shut production down. And they had to pay the cast and crew for 8 full weeks so that they wouldn't jump and take another job. And so with all of that, $80 million is what it cost. Now, insurance covered it. It didn't actually go into the budget, but still, like, that's exactly why you try to avoid those sorts of things.
Yeah, God, that's extraordinary. That is extraordinary.
That's crazy.
The score, what do you think of the score of this one? We haven't talked specifically about the score of, these movies in great depth. I'm curious how it hit you.
This one's my favorite. I think that what Lorne Balfe is doing here captures definitely like the energy. I think it all starts from that fantastic theme from the TV show, which is so iconic and gives this propulsive drive anyway. But I think the way that all the different composers have integrated that has always been fun and thrilling. And I don't know, just what Lorne Balfe is doing here, I think found a great way to kind of continue the propulsive energy in really exciting ways. And so I love this score. It's just a highlight from this film.
I have to say, I think Lorne Balfe is becoming one of my favorite composers for film. And because even in movies that I don't like, I'm finding myself listening to the score from these things again. And I really love what he's been able to do. Some of the iconic ones, like his work on his Dark Materials show, the HBO show, is extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary. Fun to listen to, fun to hum, fun to play on the piano. Like, we just love it. Luther, the Dungeons and Dragons score was great. It's like an hour and a half of music that like wonderful fantasy music that he put together that we listen to around here all the time. It's just great. And we just watched Tetris not long ago on Apple TV Plus. Great throwback score with some wonderful, fun digital elements. So, and we should also say, Lorne Balfe did the music to Ambulance. Come on.
It all comes full circle.
I think Lorne Balfe used drones to make his score.
Just a couple quick things that we didn't bring up yet, but are worth note. This is the film that had the whole mustache debacle with Henry Cavill because of the need to go back and reshoot scenes for Justice League, and then the contract. Because I think McQuarrie said, yeah, sure, just shave it off. But then Paramount was like, no. It's going to cost way too much money for us to wait around for that to grow back. And so that's Justice League had to do the digital removal. Also, there was a salary dispute for Cruise because he wanted the same amount or more that he got from Universal for doing The Mummy. And so I just think that's interesting that after all this time, he still is in a place where he's having salary disputes with the studio because of just actors and studios, especially when they're dealing with ridiculous amounts of money. So,
yeah. Do you know what he ended up getting paid for this movie?
I don't, because I know he's one of those actors who puts deals together where his paycheck may not be insanely huge, but he always is cutting deals for, I want 50% of what you get in the Asian markets or things like that. Yeah. Like, he has all these back end deals where he gets a lot of payout on the back end because he knows that there are certain countries where he gets where he draws a lot of audience. Let's see. Tom Cruise was paid an upfront fee of $28 million for his role in this film.
He does a lot of crazy stuff. Great movie.
Yeah. Well, we'll be right back, but first, our credits.
Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Jakob Pietra, Soriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. All right, Andy, how to do it award season.
This one did better than the previous ones. 25 wins with 41 other nominations at the Art Directors Guild Awards, the Excellence in Production Design Award for Contemporary Film. It lost to Crazy Rich Asians. The Motion Picture Sound Editors Golden Reel Awards. It was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Sound Editing, Music Score for a Feature Film, but lost to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Sound Editing, Dialogue, and ADR for a Feature Film, but lost to Bohemian Rhapsody. And it was nominated also for Sound Effects and Foley for a Feature Film, but lost to A Quiet Place. At the Saturn Awards, it won Best Action Adventure Film. Tom Cruise was nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Robert Downey Jr. in Endgame. The film was also nominated for Best Special Effects, but lost to Endgame. And it was nominated for Best Writing, but lost to A Quiet Place. This was an interesting one. The Location Managers Guild International Awards.
That's new.
I haven't heard of that one, but I'm not surprised. Judging by the fantastic locations in this film, though, I wasn't surprised that it won both it was nominated for. The Outstanding Film Commission, it won specifically for the New Zealand Film Commission, Film Otago Southland, for the great locations that they found to replace for Kashmir at the end of the film. And it won Outstanding Locations in a Contemporary Film. And where would we be if we weren't talking about the Toros World Stunt Awards? This film won only 2 awards, surprisingly. Best Stunt Rigging. This was for when he's on the helicopter, grabs the rope, falls, climbs back up. They created a custom rig to fit the helicopter in flight to do this whole scene. And, of course, Wade Eastwood won Best Stunt Coordinator and or Second Unit Director for all of his great work, which he's been doing pretty consistently through a lot of these films. But that was it. No Best Fight. No Best High Work, no Best Stunt Rigging, no Best Work with a Vehicle, no Best Specialty Stunt, no Best Overall Stunt by a Stunt Woman, no Hardest Hit. So, yeah, it's strange to me that in a film that I think features some of the best stuff going on in this franchise that it did not get as many nominations.
Yeah, that's the thing mostly. Like, I just feel like it should have been nominated and at least have been a part of the discussion because it's that good. It's that good and holds up so well. Okay, how to do at the box office.
Well, McQuarrie's second entry in the franchise cost $178 million, or $213.6 million in today's dollars. That makes it the second most expensive film in the franchise when adjusted for inflation. Putting it behind number 3. The movie opened July 27th, 2018, opposite Teen Titans Go to the Movies. This one took the number 1 spot, though, which it held for 2 weeks and stayed in the top 10 for 7 weeks before going on to earn $220 million domestically and $571.5 million internationally for a total gross of almost $950 million in today's dollars. That lands it in second in terms of adjusted total gross behind Mission Impossible 2 and an adjusted profit per finished minute of $5 million.
Wow. Well, and it almost gets him to the $1 billion.
Almost.
$1 billion box office for a single film. Fascinating. Well, I'll tell you, love this movie. And more than ever, I can't wait for Dead Reckoning Part 1, Andy. I cannot wait.
I can't either. You know, I will say just one thing that we brought up when we were talking about Ghost Protocol that we're wondering, will they ever mention in context of the Syndicate? Will they ever mention Cobalt, Michael Nyqvist's character, as being tied into all that? And he never has been brought up. And I've been kind of hoping that there would be some connection. I still feel a little disappointed that there wasn't some tie. That it wasn't kind of like the Syndicate is like this universe's Spectre or something. But, you know, I'm okay with it. I feel like that's one of those things that I would have liked to have been connected in some capacity. But still, I love this film. It didn't need to be there for me to be happy with it. This film is just fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic.
All right, we'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here's the trailer for our next movie, which will be released next month. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which will also be our July members bonus episode.
fighting for the so-called greater good are over. This is our chance to control the truth, the concepts of right and wrong from everyone for centuries to come. You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist. Never did. You need to pick a side.
Letterboxd, Andy. Oh, Letterboxd. It's our favorite social media network for movie lovers. You know the drill. You head over there, you sign up, you get yourself an account, you start posting the movies you like, the movies you've seen, your star ratings, your hearts, if you have those guilty pleasures, 1 star plus a heart. Oh, it's a guilty pleasure movie, chef's kiss. But if you really fall in love with it, you want to get rid of all those ads and support the fantastic Kiwi team that makes the thing, head over to thenextreel.com/letterboxd and we will save you 20%. You can also, if you're already on letterboxd.com, when you check out, just use the code NEXTREEL. Same thing. 20%. It works for renewals as well. We love it. You can find us, follow us. You can find the Next Reel, letterboxd.com/thenextreel. That's our HQ page. And you can see everything we're up to there, including our watch list for the next season starting in August. Andy, what are you going to do for this movie?
I mean, you've already mentioned, but it's just hard to find a lot of problems with this film. Like, I might have some small quibbles with some of the past films that I still really love, but this film to me is like everything that this franchise has been building to. And it's funny because this film is in some capacity so fittingly potentially a finale for this franchise. Like, I could see this really wrapping things up. We almost didn't need to go beyond this. And so I'm going to be really curious to see what Dead Reckoning does, because I feel like this film so perfectly like encapsulated the franchise and tied things up so nicely that I feel like we could have just ended it. I love it. I can't wait to see where they go from here. 5 stars and a heart. Easy.
Me too. 5 stars and a heart. Easy. Absolutely. And this is I wish we had 6 stars a little bit, because I already have a 5-star in the series. But I really, really love it. I think it's fantastic.
Well, don't forget to visit thenextreel.com/letterbox to get your patron or pro membership. It works for renewals as well. And as Pete said earlier, you can go to thenextreel.com/membership and you can learn about our membership, where you get bonus episodes, early access, ad-free, and extra content, all sorts of great stuff. So check it out. So what did you think about Mission Impossible Fallout? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
So we went in different directions this week. Where did you go?
I went low.
Oh, that makes me so sad. Is the bottom of the barrel worth looking at?
I don't know. There's not as many to enjoy as I would like. It's just a lot of people who just find the action boring, or find Tom Cruise one note. It's all the same sorts of things that you'd expect to find of people who just are not fans of either Tom Cruise or this sort of action movie or whatever. A lot of people just have those sorts of issues. But I have a half star by Patrick Starr. It's not Patrick half star, though. It's Patrick Starr giving a
Patrick Starr,
half of
star.
himself.
No half star, Patrick. Yes.
Who has this to say? One of the worst action movies of all time. So boring, and everything is so lifeless. I wish there were more movies like The Last Night. As in Transformers, The Last Night.
The Last Night.
That unfortunately, Patrick, when you say something like that, it really negates everything that you just said leading up to that point.
Oh, wow. Well, I've got a couple. 4.5 stars from Matt Singer. Tom Cruise is 56 years old, running at full speed across London rooftops like it's nothing. Yesterday, I severely twisted my ankle lightly jogging on the sidewalk. What I'm saying is, movies are magic. And also, Tom Cruise may be an actual warlock. But the better Josh gives it a 5 stars, saying, this series is literally about a clinically insane man with the best luck, and it's the greatest thing. That's probably pretty close to what's happening.
Pretty close.
Yeah. Thanks, Letterboxd. It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material from all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links support the show at no extra cost to you.
In Season 12, the focus was big franchises and series. We covered both Paddington films, adapted from the beloved children's book character created by Michael Bond.
Oh, I love those films so much.
Hugh Grant is perfect.
For our Pitch Perfect series, the first film was adapted from Mickey Rapkin's nonfiction book about collegiate a cappella competitions.
It's like a short story of my life, literally. I lived college a cappella.
Sing it, brother.
I lived college a cappella.
I didn't mean literally.
You know who you're talking to, right? The Twilight Saga dominated the season with 5 films adapted from Stephenie Meyer's vampire romance novels, Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, and the 2 Breaking Dawn parts.
Dominated with awkward romance and nonsense logic is more like it.
That too.
Another Thin Man brought us back to Dashiell Hammett's only Thin Man sequel based on other Hammett material, The Farewell Murder, that wasn't just based on the characters from the first film.
We talked about Trainspotting and its sequel, T2 Trainspotting, adapted from Irvine Welsh's novels.
I hate the sequel's name.
I do too.
And the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy adapted from J.R.R. Tolkien's epic fantasy series.
Love these.
Extended editions all the way, baby.
Plus, all the Mission Impossible films based on the 1960s TV series.
And we've still got at least one more to go.
Members got to hear us chat about The Hustler and The Color of Money, adapted from Walter Tevis's books.
Get all of these books and more at our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read from the movies we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals.